Well, welcome, caregivers. I'm really excited that you're here. I'm Allison Breininger. I think at this point I've gotten to meet most of you, but you'll get to hear a little bit more about my caregiving story. But I'm just really excited to be here with you, but also with two of my friends, colleagues, people who are really like at the forefront of supporting caregivers nationally. So Jessica Kim with Ianacare and Kyle Woody with Jack's Caregiver Coalition. I'm just really excited that the three of us get to talk to you today about caregiving. And Farf, I just want to thank you because just even having something on the agenda that calls out caregivers is a really big deal. And just to recognize that in this 3 days that there were three things that were dedicated just to caregivers is huge and recognizing us. So I want to say thank you to Farf for giving us this time. In our time together this hour, the three of us are gonna share a little bit about our personal caregiving stories. And talk a little bit about the three of us get along great and we are very different people. And so the three of us sort of walk through our caregiving life really differently from each other. And so I think it's a really great way to see that there's no right way to do this. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. So we're going to talk a little bit about our stories and the ways that we sort of get through it. And then we're going to give you some time also to sort of think about your own caregiving life and what that looks like. And then we're going to also bring you some specific supports that the three of our organizations do as well as FARF. And so hopefully you can walk away with some specific support strategies. So I get to start, and you've heard this story probably in a couple of different ways, but in case you haven't, I just want to share again that I am a caregiver for Sean, who's 41 and has FANC A. And so I just recently realized that I have spent the same number of years in our marriage pre-diagnosis as post-diagnosis. We've been married 18 years, 9 before and 9 after. So for those people who say like, I'm just a wife, I can really speak to the fact that being just a wife, like I was just a wife for 9 years, and it's really different than being a wife and a caregiver. So I've had both experiences. Shortly after he was diagnosed, he was diagnosed at an older age at 32. He went to transplant here at the University of Minnesota. We're fortunate to live in the Twin Cities right by the U. And so was transplanted with Dr. Wagner. His brother was his donor. And then since then, he's had all these cancers. And I know that when you see this, especially like bladder cancer is a strange one. That's not even an FA thing. He's just kind of the rare of the rare. I think it was maybe you, Amelia, who said earlier the thing about every little thing that they said might go wrong happened. And that's definitely the Sean story as well. Yeah. So I know that when you see stories like this and you see a list like this of the things that have happened to Sean, that can feel, at this conference especially, can feel really daunting. And I want to say that those of you who have met Sean and have heard Sean speak, he's can speak perfectly and he can eat and he just shows love like in such a beautiful way. And so all of these things have happened and he's still kicking. And I would just say that a lot of that is because of he and I are both really just keep track of all the appointments. And as soon as he sees a little thing, he goes in, and then just the advocacy that we have had to do. So instead of maybe being daunted by this list, think about if you can see some hope in it, that all these things have happened, but we caught them early because we were so conscious, and then he was able to just keep on going. So when you hear this and you think about this, the patients often think about all the things that Sean has gone through. And what I like to point out is that for each of these things, for every diagnosis, every appointment, every hospitalization, that I was right there. So for every one of these things, there's a caregiver who is sitting there next to the person, hearing the diagnosis and spending the night in the hospital. And that is very often unseen. And so caregivers who are here, I just want to recognize that I know that you have spent those nights in the hospital and you have been there for those diagnoses. A big way that I have gotten through this is I have just kind of learned to like speak my truth and tell our story. So it actually started at one of these very meetings with an FA meeting where we had a Nancy lunch just for spouses. And I remember very clearly that the few of us who were there, it's usually a small group, everyone said how grateful they were and how positive they were and how blessed they were. And although that is true, I felt like that was only half of the story. and was really sort of shocked that only that half of the story was being told. And so after that, I started writing, and did that writing so that I could tell the other half of the story. And what I have found is, for me, that writing helps me process things, because, as I'm sure you know, the like one appointment can really turn into like 1,000 days, or can feel like 1,000 days. And so the writing helps me process. It helps me tell our story so that other people know what's going on. I have found that when I share with others what's going on, we get more support, because when I tell people we're just fine and everything's great, that no one thinks to bring us a casserole or mow our lawn, right? But when I'm sharing the truth of what's happening, that I get more support. I've also found a lot of like solidarity and camaraderie through it. Jess found me because she found my writing, and she's in Boston, and we have connected through that. And so it's been a way to connect with other people who have said, yes, me too, I'm a caregiver, and this is hard too. So the way that I have gotten through this is by speaking my truth and telling my story. That's not for everyone. And so, as we'll hear, Jess, who I'm happy to introduce, has a different way of going about it. And so, Jessica, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about you and your caregiving story.
Thanks, Allison. I always love hearing you share. Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica Kim. I'm co-founder and CEO of a company called Ianacare. So some of you may have heard the term sandwich generation, right? I'm looking at everyone's faces, where you are taking care of kids and also taking care of an adult, whether it's a spouse or just another adult in their life, a loved one, or your parents. Well, there's a newer term called panini generation, because not only are we sandwiched together, but we are toasted and oozing on all sides. And I feel like that is a pretty accurate picture of how I feel right now. So I have 3 kids. They're in that picture, 13, 10, and 8. And then I'm also caring for my 82-year-old dad, who has major heart issues and a weak immune system. But my caregiving journey really started with my mom, who had pancreatic cancer for 7.5 years. And then when it came back for the 3rd time in 2015, we had my parents move in from New Jersey to Boston in with me. And I was thrust into that situation of being a caregiver. I was navigating all of her medical care. I was performing all the nursing duties. I had to drain her stomach several times a day, to feed her and bathe her. And eventually she, did in-home hospice, and then she passed away in 2017. And it was the loneliest and most complex time in my life. It was the first time that I had to quit my job because it was so overwhelming to be her full-time caregiver. And in my deep grief, I remember just being so frustrated. And, my eyes were opened up to just the millions of caregivers that were caring for their loved ones. And it was so unspoken. They were so unsupported, unpaid, untrained. And I was just frustrated because I have been in the space of technology before and in business. And so I knew the capabilities were there, and I couldn't believe that there weren't enough solutions. And I really realized that our culture and our systems weren't really set up to really embrace and support this very important role. Because the way I see, as Allison said, the caregiver is that one constant caregiver throughout the entire journey, especially as our medical system has become so specialized. You hop from one specialist to another, and the caregiver is that one constant. And then over 90% of the actual time that the person is cared for is happening in the home, and they're led by caregivers like ourselves. And so out of that, that's really what inspired the starting of Ianacare. My co-founder, Steve, and I were both family caregivers. And so we created this mobile app to really kind of help mobilize and organize, all the different layers of support that's needed for family caregivers. And so we really focused initially on the personal social circles, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I think at the core of it all, what I hope that we get from this time together today is really the essence of what Ianacare is all about too, because the IANA of Ianacare stands for I am not alone. And, there may not always be an immediate cure or immediate solution, but the one thing we can ensure is that we can, on all levels, make sure that we are not alone on this journey. And so I'm just really grateful to be here and to meet all of you. And I love that I get to see everyone's faces. I'm looking forward to hearing your stories too. Oh, okay. So I'll talk about a little bit. So as Allison said, we all kind of have a different anchor that we rely on. And for me, I won't say I'm a type A person, but I think I've become more structured. And the way I see it is caregiving. I think that one of the hardest parts about caregiving is that there aren't clear milestones. There's no timeline. Everything that you hold on to, even if it's a result of a test or the effectiveness of a treatment or just what someone's going to look, it's going to look like in 2 months, like you can't always rely on it. And so having no timeline and a lot of unknowns was really hard for me. And so so I hold on to structure, whether it's a mindset structure of like a 3-day rule, or if it's, a lot of what we created at Ianacare is a platform. So you can actually empower your friends and family to say, instead of just saying, let me know I can help, they actually can just click one button and it's on everyone's calendar and you get the help that you need. There's just some certainty in the midst of uncertainty. And I don't know. So for me, it's always a balance, but structure has given me clarity. And then clarity has just given me a lot of comfort, because even if it's a small, tiny thing, it's something that I can hold on to and rely on. And a lot of it is driven by people that can show up in your life. And so for me, I tend to try to structure things as much as possible, so they can be my anchors in the midst of, all the unknowns.
Thanks, Jess. Kyle.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Thank you to Allison and Jess and all of you for welcoming me into your home. I'm humbled by the panel here, and I don't really feel like I belong completely, but I'm here nonetheless. And as you can see, I like to call myself the primary caregiver of a Jack's Caregiver Coalition. I prefer that because I think it helps people understand what it's like to be a CEO, if they've been a primary caregiver and if they've never been a CEO. But and contrary to Jessica, I'm much more comfortable with the ambiguity. I'm I'm more of a nutty professor type. My desk I only cleaned for this conference so it wouldn't look too messy. And so that's just a little about me. You can see my family there. We have a full house. We have all of them in school at home while we work from home. So it's a little bit bananas these days. My spouse was diagnosed in 2012 with metastatic colon cancer. And it was almost a year into that journey that we had some friends that said they wanted to come hang out with us and spend a week at our home. And we were so excited. And at the dinner table that first night, we presented our itinerary for their week, where they were going to go, where they were going to stay. And they said, that's nice, but we're not here for that. We're here to serve you. And the weird part was they were looking at me. And what? I'm fine. She's the one who has cancer. Help her, serve her. And they went on to explain that before they had come to visit, they checked in with a dear friend of theirs who had lost his loved one to cancer and asked him, hey, what can we do for this family? What would make the most impact? We don't want to be a burden. We want to make an impact. And his name was Jack. And he said, serve the caregiver. They're always forgotten. And he knew from experience, right? And so I still get choked up to this day telling that story because I was so alone and I had no understanding of that it was even a thing, right? Like I was a dad, I was a professional, I was a husband, I was doing my best at all of these things, but something was missing, right? Like I just felt so alone. And so luckily, I became inspired and found someone else to pay forward that service to, because that family had spent their week at my home knocking out my honeydew list. Because since I said I didn't need anything, Sarah said, well, there's a list of things that we could use some help with. And luckily they did all those things. And so I found a person, served him. He and I teamed up, found another guy in our shoes, and that was 6 years ago. And today we've served hundreds of caregivers here in the Twin Cities. I added a few extra bullet points there just because it's always more complicated than that, right? I was legally separated. My spouse unfortunately passed away this summer. And I also got married. So some real extreme emotions this year. But yeah, that's a little about me. And if you'll flip to the next slide there, the thing that we've landed on at Jack's is less about really having answers or knowledge or expertise, and more about just solace and renewal. And so how do we create spaces that's the feelings, the outcome? And so I'll talk more about that later on.
Thanks, Kyle. I've heard the story about how Jax came to be a number of times now, and every time it just sort of stops me short because it's so true. So true. We have some friends from college who the woman was just recently diagnosed with cancer, and people are putting together a care package. And of course, I sent along things for the husband, and the husband, including a mug, and all the things that I like to do. And the husband reached out and said, "This is the only thing that was just for me that has come to the house. And it's just a coffee mug, but I have to tell you that this means a lot." And so I think that just the visual of someone turning to you, Kyle, and saying, "But no, we're here for you. We're here to help you," is just so powerful. So thank you for taking that story and turning it into this amazing organization. I'm excited for them to hear more about that in a bit. So as you see, here's 3 of us, and we all are sort of attacking this in a really different way. And I imagine that if we took each of your faces and put them on a little honeycomb here, that you would all have something a little bit different. And so I'm wondering, as you listened, were there some things that you were like, nope, none of those are for me, I have a totally different thing? Maybe a little like Venn diagram situation, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And so what I would love for you to spend some time thinking about here for a minute is, what's your big thing? And don't think about a little strategy like, I like to take a walk, or my dog brings me joy, but more about like big buckets. What is the big bucket of what helps you get through as a caregiver? And I know we have a couple of people on here who are not caregivers of people with FA, but they might be caregivers in a different way. Or you might want to think about, kind of like we just talked about in Nancy's session, what's your sort of coping mechanism with anything that's hard? It doesn't just have to be caregiving. So I would love for you to take a couple of minutes. This is not a time to log off and run away, but to take a couple of minutes to reflect. You can think, you can write, you can scribble, you can talk to the person that's next to you for a minute, but just take a few minutes to think about what it is what's your way of getting through. And maybe this is something you've never thought of before, and that's okay too. So take a couple minutes to think. If you haven't ever thought about this, I think that sometimes as caregivers, like Daniel said, when his wife was ill, he just sort of put his head down and just went forward, right? And didn't really think about it. And that was okay because that was 6 days. But for some of us, this is years and decades. And so I think it's important for us to sometimes put our head up and say, like, how am I doing this? Like, what are the ways that are getting me through? And so although we don't have time for everyone to share, I would love for you to just kind of think for yourself about, like, what was that you thought of? And if that was a new process for you, to continue to think about what it is that gets you through. I'd love to move to some of the strategic things, some of the strategies that we can share so that you can leave with some concrete things. So in my piece, I talked about how for me, what's helpful is sort of this spoken truth and shared story. So a few things that I've been doing that might be helpful for you if that's what you feel like is helpful for you. I started a podcast with a fellow young caregiver. I still call myself young. I'm kind of on the edge there, but do it for a little longer maybe. And he's caring for his wife. And so we have a podcast where we just talk about what it's like to be a young spousal caregiver, because that is very, very overlooked. So it's called In Sickness. I have my website where I write about what it's like. And then I have on Instagram where I just sort of post daily pictures of kind of what's going on here. And so for me, those are places where it's been helpful for me to share and to process, but then also to connect with other people. And so what I did want to say is that very few people are comfortable sharing their story. And so if you feel like you want the people in your lives to understand your story, but yet you feel like you don't want to say it, or you don't have the words, or you might not be comfortable, that you can feel free to always use my words. Like you could send them a podcast episode and just have them listen to it so that you don't have to say the hard words. You can make me do that dirty work for you. So those are some ways that if that's a way that could resonate with you that I've set up. Jess, will you tell them about the app? I'm excited for them to hear about it.
I will have to say that Allison is one of my all-time favorite writers about this, because she's so authentic and real. So I highly encourage everyone to follow her blog and everything. So a little bit about Ianacare. This hopefully can be helpful. It's a free app, and we built it with the caregiver, at the center of it. We designed it really looking at the caregiver journey. And what probably all of us can relate to is that it's something that you don't plan on being a caregiver. It's often through a trigger event, whether it's something that's very new or you've been doing it for years, but it's usually triggered by a diagnosis, a fall, ER visit, something. And then before we know the full medical plan or what to do, right? We first tell our friends and family, our neighbors, our coworkers, just however big or small, there are people in our lives that we interact with. And the most common thing that they say is, oh my gosh, Amelia, I'm so sorry. Let me know what I can do to help, right? And you're like, I don't even know what I need help with. I don't know what is happening. I can't even wrap my head around it. I think Daniel was saying, gosh, emotions were flooding. Like, I don't know what to do. But then as life goes on, you soon realize, wait, I have to work. I may have kids. I may have pets. Like the normal everyday business comes up. And it's not in our social construct to text all of our friends and say, you know what, I'm exhausted. Can someone make me dinner tonight? Or can someone do the grocery shopping? And so we quietly kind of suffer on our own. And we try to figure it all out. And at the same time, supporters who also want to help, they feel like they don't want to bother you because something, you're going through something really important and they don't want to say something to offend you. So help is not exchanged, even though it's desired. And so it was fascinating when we discovered that the number one reason why help is not exchanged is because the feeling of burden on both sides, on all sides. And so we really dug into this and said, gosh, it's, how can we change this? Because we do need help from our friends and family. It's the number one thing that social workers and all these patient navigators would tell us to do is get help from your friends and family, but it's really awkward to do. And so we used that as our guiding principle. It said, can we utilize technology to lift this burden? And we really did it for a year as an experiment. And this is what we created. If you look at the next slide, it's an app that, you invite your friends and family to, and you just it's really simple to do. It pulls up from your contact list. And then, they get one text message or an email. They answer one question, like, how do you know the caregiver? And then they're on the team. And then it allows you to really ask for everyday help, like meals, rides, respite care, pet care, house errands, anything. They can send you Venmo money. They can send you gift cards. You can link your Amazon wish list to it. And it is just all right there. And you fill out all the details. So you can request like a meal or request a ride or someone to come sit with you. And you fill out all the details. And if you can see on the second screen, like you see everything all in one place. It blasts out to your supporters. Your supporters look at it and, they click that one button that says, I got this. And all of those details that you see there go right on your calendar without translating anything. So it really takes all the back and forth of texting and, oh wait, did you say Tuesday? I thought you said Wednesday. And then it's just so much work that you say, forget it. So we take all of that out, and with one click of a button, you can get that help on your calendar. And I think the other powerful thing is, a lot of people said, and Allison is, has used our product a lot. But you don't need to talk to anybody. It takes the awkwardness of saying, Teresa, can you come and make me a meal? And then what Teresa's put on the spot, and I feel awkward asking for it. So this is where technology can kind of give that space, and people who agree to be on your team, they're there for one reason. There are many reasons why you're on Instagram or Facebook or group text, but there's one reason why I'm on your team. And that's because I actually said, I want to help. And so this allows you to kind of get that help without the awkwardness of it. And then you can also keep everyone updated in a very private feed. So you can upload, it's very much like a Facebook group page. It's you can upload updates and photos, and people can comment and hug it. And there's a big synergy between keeping everyone updated and getting the help that you need when you do, because everyone kind of knows what's happening, but there are no algorithms, no one's stealing your information. It's very private. So this is something that's out there. It's international, so anyone can download it, and you can invite your friends, and it'll always be free. Just so you know, the way, as a company, we work with other employers and insurance plans and things like that with other features. But this will always be free, and I hope it can be helpful to any of you.
You answered one of my questions, Jess. So, because we have here Israel, Denmark, Australia on this call. So it's anywhere?
You can be anywhere.
Okay. So you just go into we got it.
Oh,
nice.
There you go.
I love it. I love it. So yeah, so you just go into the App Store and it's there for free. And I mean, I have been using it, and I tell you that even just having it makes me feel better, because just knowing that, like, if something came up and I needed something right away, like, I have this team of, I don't know, maybe we have like 40-ish people on our team, maybe 50, that I can just send it and boom, it just goes out. And so back in the day when I went to school physically, there were times that, like, we would be at the doctor, it would take longer than we thought, and we could send out a thing like, someone needs to pick up Maya. It would have like the address of her school and her cell phone number and our address and everything. And of course, these are people that we trust with that information because they're on our team. I could just send it out once, and I didn't have to like text this person and wait for their response on Texas. I could just send it out once. Whoever said yes got all that information. So it's been a game changer for us. This family I was just mentioning earlier, where a friend of ours from college was just diagnosed with breast cancer. They they created a Facebook group, and then they had, here's our meal train app, and here's our Venmo thing, and here's our Amazon, and I just thought, oh guys, like, this does all of that like in one place. So I highly recommend it. And also I think something I love is that as an FA community, like, there's people like Jess who like has done things on our wish list from Boston, because you can, I can say we need dinner on Tuesday, and she's found ways to like have dinner be delivered. Yeah. So I think it's a cool way for us as a FA community to support each other, even though we're far away, because there's lots of cool ways to do that in the app too. So thanks, Jess.
It's amazing, Jessica. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. And I'll leave
I'm going to try it.
Try it, and I'll leave my contact info if you have any questions, even if it's a silly onboarding question as you try to download it. Just feel free to text me or email me.
Yeah, and if you ever can't, I'm in close contact with Jess too, and so if you ever can't get a hold of her, can't find her email, you can get, if you have mine, I can get you to her too. So, yeah. Kyle, you want to tell us about Jax?
Yeah, and I want to echo to Allison's skill with the quill is undeniable, and you need to read her blog, and also that I've also been a user of Ianacare and highly recommend it. I think it's so cool that, we talk a lot in our community about how do you ask for help, and why is it that it never gets easier with practice? Like, it's still hard. If you've been doing it for 8 years, it's still hard. And why is that? And so I think it's kind of cool that you just don't, or you ask your phone, right? You ask an app for help. And for some reason, that's a lot easier. You're not talking to a person. So highly recommend Ianacare as well. So with Jack, so one of the things that we do is we create spaces that inspire solace and renewal. But I'd like to just start with why. Why do we think that's necessary? And for most guys, caring for a loved one with a catastrophic illness is a world that is riddled with uncertainty and isolation. Two things that breed anxiety, exhaustion, fear, and depression. Two things that unfortunately cause most guys to isolate themselves even further rather than reaching out, because they've been taught, as I was, that reaching out is a sign of weakness. And so what we imagine, our vision, if you can take the next slide, Allison, we imagine a very different future for these guys. Jacks are guys who are caregivers for loved ones with any catastrophic illness. And our vision for them is a community, a global community. And I find it fascinating that we're here in this global conversation. This is the first time I've ever been involved in anything like this. All of our work has been local up until the pandemic. We've done some national things, but this is the first time, to my knowledge, we've spoken to a global audience. And I think it's important to point out that this community is for them. It's not necessarily of them. So the sponsors that we recruit, the funding that we are able to find, that is all part of that community, as are the Jacks themselves. But to elaborate on what that community is about, the community we imagine will someday ensure that every caregiver experiences renewal and solace every single day. Two things that in my role as a caregiver, I never experienced once. The community we imagine will inspire and equip every caregiver to face their challenges the opposite of how I did. I was nervous, ill-equipped, isolated, insecure, but with our community, they will face their challenges boldly, with energy, with enthusiasm, and with confidence. And the loved one that I cared for had one ill-equipped and isolated caregiver who didn't understand the power of letting other people be the magic. The community we imagine will someday give an entire team of highly equipped caregivers to everyone facing catastrophic illness. And so that's our vision. What do we do now? What's our mission? What's our work look like? That's the outcome that we are hoping for. If you can go to the next slide. Our mission statement is improving the way that guys think, feel, and act through every phase of their caregiving journey. And that mission statement has been updated just this year. We added the part about through every phase because we noticed that many in our community were losing their loved ones. It's often, unfortunately, an outcome of catastrophic illness. And then the language would turn into, well, I'm on the other side, or I don't belong here anymore. And we said, wait, this is just another chapter of the same story. So we need to create a consistent support system that bridges these gaps. And so, but that also can look like remission of the disease or the illness. And then they'll say, well, I've been laid off. I'm not really doing the caregiver thing anymore. It's like, well, are you sure? Because you're still worried about it coming back, right? Your life is still, you're still been traumatized. It's not over. We don't believe for many folks who might say that it is. And then, just a little bit about our programming. Allison asked me to explain what the folks you guys here might be able to have access to, because prior to the pandemic, we were local only here in the greater Twin Cities metro, and we would have in-person events that I still dream about, that we don't get to do as much anymore, although we are doing sporting clays this fall. But because everything is virtual now, we can open it up to anyone. And so we do have guy only. We call them Thirsty Thursdays, and that's for the guys only. It's just an hour, and we literally just get on the Zoom with your favorite beverage, orange juice, tea, beer, whatever, and we shoot the shit. Sorry for my language use there, but that's kind of how we just talk like anybody else. And then we do clatches, caregiver clatches. We have different editions of those, but the important part about the clatches is that they're co-ed. So while our mission is focused on guys, one thing we've learned is that we are better able to help the guys when we include the gals. And so it's cool because it also helps out the women, you know, because it's not easy for them either. I'm talking all about the guys, but of course it's just as hard for the women caregivers. So the clatches are there, and then we have a podcast. We have and I'm excited that our next episode is actually Allison Breininger. You may have heard of her. And we do blogs. We have Help, I'm a Caregiver. It's a Caregiver 101. So that we designed specifically for those that are brand new to the role. And that can be done virtual. That's also co-ed. With Jack to Jack is a peer-to-peer matching program. So we just match up guys who are caregivers with other guys who are caregivers. And then we also have a private Facebook group space that some people get a lot out of, especially if they're Facebook users. And I'm sure there's other stuff that I'm forgetting, but I'm always here if you just want to talk about, am I a good fit? Do I really belong? Is it catastrophic? Isn't it? You know, just call me up and let's figure it out.
Thanks, Kyle. And I think that Jordan put the Jack's website in the chat. So check that out as well. So as you could hear, that Jack's is primarily for male caregivers, but there are some things that are co-ed as well. So we're almost out of time, but I wanted to end to make sure that here's our three of our handles for the three of us. But a couple of things. One is that we can continue this conversation in Slack. Another is that Jordan and I have been working hard and are just sort of starting the process of really thinking about what are the ways that FARF can embed caregiver support into everything they do. And so if there are things that you feel like you would like FARF to offer that would be helpful to you in your caregiving life, reach out to one of us, as we are sort of in the dreaming and planning stages of how we can better support all of you as caregivers. We want you to know that you don't have to just wait for like one time a year for this 1 hour to talk about what your caregiving life is like, but that we're going to come up with ways throughout. And so please reach out to Kyle or to Jessica or to me and think about using any of those resources, and we'll continue the conversation in Slack. But thank you very much. I know it's the end of a long weekend, and I appreciate that you all took time to be here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Allison, Jessica, and Kyle, for just taking the time to share with us today. I am so incredibly proud of the work you're doing in this area, and I'm so grateful for all of your input as FARF works to better serve caregivers in our community. And please always let us know how we can do better, and that's to all of you here on this call today. How can we do better? Let us know.